What was Carr doing at that time?
My father,
Yeah.
he was retired, supposedly, and he was really running the printing and the publishing operations for his brother's scholarly music um, uh, publishing business. His brother, my uncle, was in Europe, where all the sources for his scholarship were, and the technical and the management and the printing and the distribution all came in Dallas.
Okay, so this wasn't the doctor brother or the lawyer brother?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, the doctor brother was in New York City. Right.
Did your wife ever have any specific input or influence on your decisions, or was she mainly always a supportive role, or was she ever a driver, a catalyst for change in any specific direction? Either, well, I'm sure she was in many, many ways, but I guess more specifically for any major changes, whether moving or not moving, maybe.
That's an interesting question. She really was a supporter in virtually everything that we ended up deciding together. There wasn't a thing, I think, in relation to what do we do next, or what do I do next, or what does she do next, that either one of us did unilaterally. Not at all. We were pretty much cooperative people on that question. We were partners in thinking, what's the best way to go to the next step? You know, okay, so this has ended. What do we do now? What's the best way to go? We worked on that together, pretty much. She didn't always agree, and I didn't always agree, but no, we cooperated pretty well. She was a great one for making a pro and con lists side by side, and I never wanted to fool with those things, and you know, I just wanted to think of all that I could, what's most important, and then make a decision. But she'd always like to write down on paper, for whether it was for me or for her, all the pros, all the cons, or this way, whichever way it happened to be, and do it in a kind of a formal way. What's next?
Let me see here. If you have anything to add?
No, not really yet.
Questions in particular?
Now, you know, you were going to stump me with all sorts of interesting questions. Remember that? You were going to come up and get me up against a wall, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll give you one. In terms of career moves, at least with the children, Pete, Paul, all of them, did you ever feel like, I guess, not necessarily back talk, but where you actually noticed a negative effect on them when you did make a move, like from Chattanooga, or did you notice a positive effect and change ever?
You know, there were probably negative effects more than I knew, or more than I was aware. Negative impact on them when how did it impact the children when we moved?
Yeah, or how did you notice it impacted the children?
I have to admit that I really was not exactly the most sensitive guy in the world on that point. I have to admit that their mother, Cherry, was probably much more sensitive to that than I was. I was struggling too hard to make sure that the next step, whatever it was, got established properly and well, and produced the income we needed. I think only in retrospect did either one of us look back and realize that, boy, this one or the other of our 5 children.
And I guess in terms of the best moves for career, did you notice, I guess, the biggest benefit in Dallas? Did you see a lot more? Did you guys interact a lot more with your father and family and everything? And
Well, my parents lived only a block away from us.
right.
And that was that's right. You did. I don't think you really realized that. Yeah, we bought a house in Dallas. My parents had already been in Dallas for 10 years, in far north Dallas, and we bought a house. The premise for us buying a house was we have to buy a house that we can buy for no money down, and be able to afford the payments, and it's big enough for a family with 5 children. And it just happened to be that a block away from my parents, there came this, you might call it a fire sale, where an Episcopal priest had gotten crosswise with the Episcopal bishop in the Dallas area. And so he had to move out. And so he had only recently bought this property, and we acquired it literally by taking over the payments. And it was big enough for us and our 5 children. And there it was, a block away from my children's grandparents,
Wow.
my parents. That was purely, you can either say it was pure luck, or you can say there's the finger of God working somehow or other, one way or the other. And so what it ended up producing was the experience of your parents having the opportunity to be able to walk out our back door, down the alley, a block into their back door, and spending time with them. And my 5 children, your parents, and my parents really had quite a on most counts, on most, not universally and not perfectly, and not all the way with every single one of them. But there was really quite a bond that happened between my parents and my children. That was really a great part of their growth, great experience. Your father especially, I would say, Jeff, found quite strong and powerful meaning out of that, and yours did too. Yours did too.
Switching gears a little bit, but staying with the changes that have taken place over your lifetime, if you could name one thing or a couple major things, the whole, what would be the biggest change, do you think?
In the world or in my life?
Whole world. In your lifetime, what do you think has been the biggest transformation or the biggest change that you've seen?
Gee whiz. You did promise me a stumper, didn't you? I suppose that the best answer would be putting up with the likes of you. But that wouldn't be totally truthful.
I'm glad I trumped technology. I always thought it in my head. I just, to hear you say it, just validates it that much more.
No, I think you're talking really about. I think the way you're asking that question is you're talking about in terms of earth-shaking, world-changing kind of.
The biggest transformations, I guess, that you've seen overall in the world during your lifetime, whether it be the evolution or the opposite of that, possibly of politics, or the change in transportation. Or I thought, I'm glad it's not necessarily the first thing you say, but I thought maybe technology would be a easy word to grab, or along those lines, or even something more basic. I wasn't sure what you thought would be the most significant change during your lifetime.
The real answer is all of the above. It truly is, because whether you're talking about transportation, you're talking about technology, you're talking about communications,
Religion,
whatever you're talking about,
environment.
there has been huge change in my lifetime.
Sure.
Being born in 1929, just the things that have happened. Biplanes were the planes of the day. As I've already narrated in some previous sessions, my grandparents' home, where my brother and I and my mother spent our summers when we were young boys, they didn't have even paved streets. They didn't have the umbilical cord with power lines. They didn't have. They did have light, but they did it by battery power that was charged by a windmill, which was extraordinary even for that technology in those days, out rurally. The telephone was one telephone in the dining room, the central room of the house, literally, and it was a big house, and you dialed it by cranking it, and the number of cranks you gave either rang the operator who could connect you to somebody, and there were about 5 other people on the same line as you, and you knew which ring was yours, and you knew how to reach somebody else on the line. But think of that in comparison. That's 1930s. Think of that in comparison with what you carry around in your pocket, and what we have today, and what I carry around in my pocket. I don't do what you do with mine, what you do with yours, but huge change. Look at the planes. A biplane landed in a field across the road from my grandfather's farm in those days. There were not DC-3s even yet in those days, back then. There were Ford Trimotor existed. And a big cargo plane, and a big plane would carry what, maybe 25, 30 people, maybe. And so compare with that with a 747-600 or whatever the current number is that they've got out there. Say nothing about the big double decker that they make in France. It's huge, and the plane could only go a short distance. Cars.
Do you think it's generally true to call it progress, or do you think that we've become so complicated as a society that it's actually detrimental? Basically, is it overall, in broad strokes, a positive or negative?
You're asking about good or bad in relation to the changes that we've gone through. The consumerism aspect of the change. The product development and technology, as far as I'm concerned, is fine. I think we've improved. We've improved to the point where we can do so much more in the whole world than we could even dream about in the 1930s. We could literally, if we felt like it, we could solve the world's hunger problem if we went. The capability is there. We have enough food. We have enough resources. We have enough transportation. All we have is the political will not to do it or not to do it. We don't do it. We could solve all of the hunger problems in the world anytime we felt like it. It was impossible to even know about the needs for hunger back in the 1930s because communication couldn't tell us. There was no way to know. The educational capabilities are so much greater now because we have technological resources to be able to get information that we could never get before.
Yeah. Well,
transportation is huge difference.
Yeah. Well, you've talked about a lot of locally based, or at least United States based stuff in your experience in a local thing. I guess in terms of other world travel, when you went overseas to Japan, how did that, I guess, have a turning point, or did it have any kind of impact or effect on your life in seeing another culture and another point of view?
Well, I was 21 when I went to Japan, and when I went to Japan, as you know, after the war ended, the American forces and others too, but mostly the U.S. forces, occupied Japan for quite a few years, and I was there for 1949. I was there from 1950 to the middle of 1950 to the end of 1952. And in early 1952, April 15th exactly, they became free, and the occupation ended on April 15th. So I was able to get acquainted with a different culture, if that's where we're really going, is get acquainted with a different culture. But I was so young, I didn't know enough to really think about it a lot and really explore it and really come to understand it well. I just picked up what little I could pick up as I went along, doing my job. I was in medical statistics for the whole Far East network for the Army, and then I was in Armed Forces Radio Service doing broadcasting, and so I didn't get out a lot. But on April 15th, the difference between what preceded April 15th in 1952 and what came afterwards was huge. All of a sudden, they were free people, and they didn't have to be subservient like they had been up until April 15th. And you know, that Asian culture, if they're defeated, they are defeated. And they really behave like defeated people. Well, all of a sudden, they weren't defeated anymore, they were free. And it changed almost instantly. You could sense it all over the country very quickly. It was good to get acquainted with that culture, and I've been very, very happy ever since then to get at least exposed a little bit to it. I have very strong memories. I have a couple of rolls of Kodachrome film. It wasn't even called Kodachrome. It was 10 ASA of 10. Very slow. And I had an Argus C3 camera. And so I did get some pictures that capture a little bit of the sense of the place.